Without any further ado, I'm going to start off with our first session today, and that's about the Student Curator Project, Creating Connections Through Collections. And we have today our two speakers, Catherine Batson, who's Associate Director of Student Experience at the University of Surrey, and Paul Johnson, who's also at the University of Surrey. He's the Director of Library and Learning Services. So in introducing this session, I can tell you that since 2018, Library and Learning Services at the University of Surrey have been running a collaborative staff-student partnership project based around the collections and resources in the library. The Student Curator Project developed as a result of discussions between the Students' Union President and the library about how the university could shine a spotlight on the unique diversity of the lived experience of students at Surrey, whilst making the library collections come to life. So over to you, Catherine and Paul.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that introduction, and thank you for RLUK for having us here today. So we're going to talk about the Student Curator Project, and Catherine's going to do the bulk of that, having been here through the whole thing. And I'm just going to kick us off with a few initial thoughts about it and comments from my perspective as well.
Sorry, there we go.
We're going to go backwards to start with, just to kick us off. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Catherine. Can you move on to the next slide? So what I thought about actually when we did this is I should explain why we're here today. So why are we here and why am I here actually? So this initiative has been going on for 5 years and I've only actually been working at Surrey for 2 years. So it is clear that I can't take any credit at all for this, as all that goes to Catherine, who will tell you more about this, as well as former colleagues involved, and of course, all the students who have contributed to this over the years. And it'll be really, it's certainly, I know you won't know those students, but it's certainly nice for us to see some of the students who have contributed over the years in these slides as we go through. And even on the left there in that, we've got Megan, who's our current Student Union Vice President there. So you'll see some of those contributions from the students who are really important in this. So really my only contribution is, as a friend of RLUK, suggesting to Catherine that we take this to this conference because it was relevant to the themes. And actually, I thought it would see us to nicely take this to a slightly wider and different audience. But the real reason I actually did this was because it was one of those things that impressed me most when I started my job here at Surrey. So we have a real focus on students at Surrey. And I was just so impressed, not only that such a project had taken place, but also that it was still going strong after 5 years. And I suppose in summary, that's the real reason I'm here today, as a sort of cheerleader for this, having seen that it existed, but continues to go from strength to strength. And to illustrate this is something not in the presentation because it's too recent, but I'm going to borrow a chance conversation which Catherine and another colleague told me about, where they were actually looking at one of our displays about a student who just came up to them. So this is a student not involved with the project at all, but she had seen the display and she had this conversation. I'll repeat a bit of the conversation as it was sort of relayed to me through Catherine. And this student said, "I would like to give credit where credit's due. I love the projects you have in this corner and it makes me feel really welcome. I really appreciate what you have done here." So I think for me that illustrates that it impacts not only the students who become curators, and there's a huge impact on them, but also our students more widely who are using the library. So with that, I will hand over to Catherine to tell you into a little bit more detail about the project itself.
Thank you very much, Paul. So yes, Paul's just given us a little bit of a background to the Student Curator Project here at Surrey. Just to put a little bit of context, it is a student staff partnership project based on diversifying and decolonising collections, developing relationships, championing global voices, and really wanting to build a sense of belonging at Surrey. The original idea came from our colleague, Catherine Stephen, a previous associate director at Surrey. And she asked the librarian team, how can we make the library come to life? How can we make it relevant to students? Now, this wasn't a small task, but that's really how the Student Curator Project was born. So from 2018, the library and the Students' Union have been working together in partnership, looking at our collections and resources and how they support and celebrate the diversity in our teaching and learning. Our motivations really are to highlight the lived experiences of our students, promote inclusion and belonging, and to expand and showcase the breadth of library collections and our archives, both physically in the library with displays, talks, creative action, reaction boards, but also through our social media channels as well. Our aims of the projects have been to recognise national conversations and decolonising the curriculum, as well as empower our students, whether that's financially, creatively, intellectually, whilst developing real-world skills, such as budgetary, project and team management. So the projects have evolved as they have as each year comes on. In the first 2 years of the projects, the library, as we said, worked really closely with the Students' Union, and the Students' Union actually regularly nominated students to become the next curator. However, this evolved. We then created a board with the Students' Union, and we came up with themes and advertised to the whole student body whether they wanted to become one of the student creators. We asked them to send in a submission of about 200 words on their theme and why they wanted to be a curator. However, we've also gone through another evolution now, and I've actually noticed for the past 2 years, we haven't actually had to advertise, do you want to become the next student curator? Because we've had students putting themselves forward and their themes before we've actually had a chance to organise the next series. So to me, that really shows the impact that the project had within the institution, that the students are really, you know, the body are running it themselves. We now have a growing archive of reading lists from the student curators that they have created, and the library team has created a list of lists. And we also have an online archive of all the past projects, bringing together the photos, the blog posts, and all the social media activities. We have lots of different themes as part of the creations. As you can see, students have chosen Black History Month, LGBT History Month, Invisible Disabilities, Navigating Neurodiversity, Empowering Women, Intersectionality and Colourism, just to name a few. So each student creator does take a different approach to their project. The creators work alongside a small project team of library staff who support them in identifying and gathering the physical items for the displays and helping them put together virtual displays, whether that's books, digital resources, or materials from our archives. We explore different learning tools and to promote their finds. The curators have run talks, mini lectures, we've had panel discussions, interactive displays, they've posed questions out to the university community, they've created their own Spotify playlists, we've had some fantastically collaborative written haikus, and we've also had inspirational lucky dips. The student creators have a small budget and they can add to the library collections on their theme. During the pandemic, obviously we couldn't have a physical display in the building, so the projects pivoted and they went purely virtual. We had a big social media campaign with Instagram takeovers, online quizzes, poetry, interviews and reaction boards. So what does partnership mean to us? Partnership is really working together to create change. We explicitly say that the students are the subject expert in the partnership. So they lead the projects. They know that their leadership, participation and contribution is really valued in the highest terms. We encourage a sense of ownership, inclusion and equalising of power relationships. We really have an emphasis on participative democracy. We hope that this way of thinking positions students as partners, as experts and colleagues, rather than evaluators of teaching and learning, which so often happens in projects like this. Also, not having a disciplinary or departmental association means that the schemes are open for all. We have found that the library and the student creators have been leading voices within the institution, particularly on the work of decolonisation of our collections. In particular, we've had one project on colorism, which was run by Catherine Anyanwu, whose picture is here on the screen. She really had run a really significant project, and it went well beyond the walls of the university. Catherine ran this project on colorism. She collected interviews around people's experiences with colorism, created her own podcasts with the Students' Union. She ran interviews highlighting stories from students within her own halls. One of them who described a time when she herself wasn't allowed to stand in the front row of her ballet show because her skin was considered too dark. Catherine chose works of literature that reflected her theme and even included scientific research papers on the effects of skin lightening creams. She taught and educated the university in colorism and was recognised within the university for an EDI award. We saw significant outreach as well. The project went viral. She was retweeted by influencers in South Africa. So what we'd like to do is we've got a short excerpt of an interview with Catherine.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Anyanwu. I recently graduated from the University of Surrey. I studied digital marketing and channel management. I wanted to become a student creator because I just saw it as an exciting opportunity, to share my personal experiences and in some way shed light to an ongoing problem in the African and Caribbean communities. And although I never had any prior knowledge to, what it takes to become a student creator, but I was quite excited to, be a part of this. And to me, it's one of the best decisions I've made so far. My theme was colorism, and the reason why I chose this was, first, it was quite personal for me, and everybody knows about racism, but they're not aware to the other parts of racism, which is colorism, which is something that is very dominant in the African and Caribbean, and also the Asian communities as well. So I decided to, speak about this topic and also raise more awareness to this because it's something that is happening within our communities. And I found out that a lot of people, as a result of, being of a darker skin tone and wanting to feel more accepted into the society, drastically go through the process of skin bleaching, and most of them are not really aware of the effects of skin bleaching. So it was very important for me to highlight that and also bring more awareness, out there as well. The experience overall was quite enjoyable for me. It was my first time doing this sort of project, and interacting with the library team and also members of staff as well was a very good experience because as a student, I usually do not get to have that kind of interactions with members of staff, and also being able to interview other students from different cultures and backgrounds, gave me a much more in-depth understanding and knowledge that, other people actually, having these issues in their communities, not just the African or the Caribbean community that has this kind of problem. Other Asians also have, it's actually quite big in the Asian community, which was a very interesting thing to know about. And also, during the interview, I got to speak to someone who had more scientific knowledge about skin bleaching and the long-term effects, which is skin cancer. So this was a very educative experience for me in general.
So that's Catherine, who ran one of our projects. We do ask our student curators to reflect on their time as curators, and you can see some of the comments on the slide here. I do have also a lovely quote from Catherine when she reflected on her project, and she said, "It has enabled me to appreciate myself more, put things into perspective in regards to what is the most important, which is appreciating the uniqueness both in myself and everyone else. Each individual embodies diverse cultures, religion, and orientation. Rather than paying attention to difference, look closely and see that we are all connected, and that's what makes life beautiful. Which is a really lovely quote to be able to share with you all. Obviously, we have positive things, and our students do have challenges with their projects. Time management is one of the ones that they often reflect on, working independently and being able to cope with meeting clashes. For library staff, again, we reflect on our time with the students and each individual project. We find it a fantastic opportunity to work with our students more closely and build some really long-lasting relationships. We've even managed to co-write a journal with 2 of our student curators, and the link is at the end of the presentation. It is an opportunity to build meaningful relationships, and most importantly, enables us to understand others' lived experiences. We do understand we have to be flexible with each student. Every student has a different approach to it, to their project. It can be very time intensive, and for our library staff who are doing this alongside their day-to-day commitments. We have found it is essential to the success of the projects to centre it around the lived experiences of our students. Positioning of the content encouraging safe and brave spaces for critical debate, and challenging the assumption that a university is already fully inclusive. So finally, for us, we're always looking towards the next steps. We really want to give greater ownership for the library's social media channels to our students when they have a project on their themes. We want to work closer with the university central marketing teams to highlight the projects and really put a spotlight on them. We want to improve our web archive of past curations. I've already got a different platform in mind because I really want it to pop with the photographs and the blog posts and Instagram posts that we have on there. We're exploring the ongoing work on decolonising the curriculum and how to advance the Student Curator Project with getting more of their recommendations on reading lists. And we've also been managed to set up a student-led fiction collection within the library. And finally, which is most important, we want to make sure that we reward and recognise all of our student curators. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. That's really wonderful and really inspirational. And I'm sure that people have a lot to ask in the Q&A. So everybody, if you could put your questions in the Q&A, but we will move on quite quickly to our next presentation. So just to, if Katie and Alison could just pop your videos on, that would be wonderful. So although we're actually going to show a video just now, we do have our 2 live presenters as well who'll be there to answer your questions. So the next presentation is called There Once Was a Giant Building. And the authors of the presentation are Katie Flanagan, who is Group Head of Archives and Libraries of the Science Museum Group, and Alison Faraday, who's Collections Engagement and Volunteering Manager of the National Collections Centre. So welcome along, both Katie and Alison. In introducing this presentation, I can tell you that the Science Museum Group is home to 7 million archive and library items, many of international significance. These are available to researchers in reading rooms at 5 of the museum sites. In 2024, they will be opening an innovative, accessible new space, which will allow researchers the unique opportunity to study objects alongside archive and library material for the first time, both in person and remotely. And we're really pleased they'll be telling us more about this in their presentation entitled There Once Was a Giant Building. And
Welcome to our presentation on There Once Was a Giant Building.
I'm Alison Faraday, Collections Engagement and Volunteering Manager.
And I'm Katie Flanagan, Group Head of Archives and Libraries. We both work for the Science Museum Group. Science Museum Group isn't just the Science Museum in London. We have 6 sites spread across England. This includes Locomotion at Shildon, the National Railway Museum at York, National Science and Media Museum in Bradford, Science and Industry Museum in Manchester, and the National Collections Centre, which is at the Science and Innovation Park near Swindon. Science Museums Group's archive and library collections are huge and varied, numbering around 7 million items. Some of the highlights include the Archive of Evidence for Royal Commission on Technical Instruction, which includes 45 boxes of programmes, reports and evidence collected in the 19th century on educational institutions in Europe and the USA. We have Sir Patrick Moore's Archive and Library. Our trade literature collection includes over 75,000 items from several thousand companies, including technical or promotional literature, which gives information about manufactured products, particularly trade catalogues and instruction manuals. Our archives cover a wide range of science subjects, including astronomy, chemistry, chemical engineering, the earth sciences, bridges, canals, tunnels, telecommunications, electrical power production, electrical and gas lighting, domestic appliances, nuclear engineering, ships and flight, railways, rockets, space flight and satellites, amongst other things. And our rare books include early examples by Boyle, Copernicus, Harvey, Kepler, Newton and Berzelius, and more recent examples including books by Marie Curie, Charles Darwin and Albert Einstein. We have archive and library reading rooms at 5 of our sites. All offer invigilated, bookable access to archives and our rare books or special collections material. London and York both also have libraries with browsable shelves for drop-in users. York has a more informal drop-in area with comfortable seating and children's books. And the picture here on the slide shows the Summer Reading Challenge last summer, when families could drop in to enjoy children's books and activities themed around engineering. These spaces are all available to staff, volunteers and external users.
Here at the National Collections Centre based at the Science and Innovation Park near Swindon, we've just recently completed building a brand new store for our collection items. It's the engine of the Science Museum Group, bringing people and collections together, fueling new ideas, research and projects. It's a collection. It drives improvements in collections care and facilitates dynamic circulation of objects around the group and beyond for exhibitions, loans and research. It's part of a unique and inspiring landscape. People benefit from working in a spacious, natural environment where sustainability initiatives are present and empowering. I've got a short video which shows you the collection centre before we started to move objects in. So I'll show that to you now. We're super excited that next year in 2024 will be open to the public for behind the scenes tours, but will also be open to researchers too. Research access will be broadly defined, proactively encouraged and grounded in partnerships. A researcher is defined as someone who wants to see something from our collection. We'll offer remote visits, which will be synchronous, i.e. live, or asynchronous, recorded, using things like a visualizer and a GoPro. We'll have in-person researcher visits 4 days a week, most weeks of the year. Those in-person visits will be in our purpose-built study space. It's a dedicated study room adaptable for objects to be viewed together and alongside library and archive material. Currently, it's being used as a base for our unpacking staff, which is why I can't show you any photos of it at the moment. Once they have finished unpacking everything, you can see a Dalek being moved here, it will be refreshed and kitted out with flexible furniture and equipment to allow for in-person and remote visits. It is accessible. The NCC should be open for all. It should lead the sector in research access, have a reputation for excellence in volunteering, be connected to local communities, and welcome broad and diverse audiences on inspiring behind-the-scenes tours. Will be accessible as well, both physically, in terms of level access, parking right outside, things like neurodiversity, meeting people's individual needs, and taking into account their research experience, so providing support for people who've not done any research before.
We wanted to show you some of the rich possibilities that we'll be able to entertain once the new researcher access space is open. So we started off with the Lovelock archive. James Lovelock is famous for the Gaia hypothesis, formulated in the 1960s, suggesting that the Earth acts like a living, self-regulating organism. We have his archive here at SMG, but alongside that, you would also be able to see objects produced by him to conduct experiments, such as this gas chromatograph used to analyse air samples during a research voyage to Antarctica in 1971.
Another collection which offers rich possibilities is that of the Royal Aircraft Establishment. We have a large number of objects and items from there. A bit of background information, they're based in Farnborough, Hampshire. It's where the first powered flight in Britain took place by Samuel Cody in 1908. It became a base for aeronautical and space research. After being privatised in the 90s, there's been several name changes. It's now known as Kinetic. What have we got? This shows a snapshot, just one corner of the collection with things nicely shelved and beautifully displayed. You can see there a scale model of an airborne early warning Hawker Siddeley British Aerospace Nimrod AEW3 aircraft. This one is copper clad for evaluation of radio and radar, aerial polar diagram analysis and investigations. We have various archives related to the work of the Royal Aircraft Establishment too. This one relates to the Concorde, Concorde 002 prototype. So this was the first UK prototype of the Anglo-French aircraft, and its primary purpose was to serve as a test and development aircraft for the fleet of 16 Concordes that were to be built for British Airways and Air France. The archive contains select technical specifications of the aircraft and comprehensively documents the 7 years of test flights between 1969 and 1976. It consists of around 500 plans, sets of information relating to aspects of the aircraft, BAC publications, notes of meetings, templates for forms and logs, and a small collection of colour photographs. Here you can see a screen grab of the archive online with just a selection of what's available. But we have objects too, ranging from the very large to the very small. This is a radome or nose cone made for Concorde from about 1970. It's aircraft's radar sits. It's made from glass fibre reinforced epoxy resin. The nose cone was designed to be tilted downwards on takeoff and landing from its normal horizontal position in order to give the pilots better forward visibility. We have various wing models as well, showing the different stages of wing development to create the unique delta wing that Concorde is most famous for. These are wind tunnel models of the delta-shaped merged fuselage. This is one of 4 original Concorde drop models, so it was dropped out of a plane to actually see how it would fly. We've also got various ephemera as well, personal stories. So this is a selection donated by Alistair Greenless, who flew on Concorde in January 1978 with BAC from Manchester Airport. There's a Concorde window sticker on the left-hand side. It says, British Airways Concorde, arrive in better shape. There's souvenir slides of the aircraft and interior, and there's a luggage label too. And finally, a really personal one from me. I love the RAE collection as my dad worked there in the 1960s, but apart from one really small paragraph on his CV, I had no idea what he actually did. Jack, our fantastic archivist, was able to find the organisation chart and find my dad on it. And the phone book too, so here he is again. And this listed the building he worked in too, which I was able to find on this map here. So now I know a little bit more. I know the building he worked in. One day when I've got more time, I'm going to do some more research to see what else we have. So this is an invitation to you. Look out for our publicity, stay in touch, and come and visit us in 2024 when you can experience these rich collections for yourself.
Thank you so much, Alison and Katie, for producing that video. I know one of the drivers for that was that Katie's been moving house, so that's brilliant that she's actually managed to do both, and she's come in today at the same time as having moved house. So congratulations, Katie. I'd like to invite both Catherine and Paul to come back on the video, and also Alison. Fantastic, thank you very much. So lots of questions coming through. So I'm just going to be the mouthpiece of the questions and address them to you for you to answer. So some questions first for Catherine. So Catherine, the student curators are a wonderful idea. Are they paid, and what budget do they have to work with?
Right, that is quite a regular question, actually. Do we pay our student curators? No, we don't. And everyone is often quite surprised by that, but genuinely, they all say when the theme is so close to their heart, they want to do it completely, voluntary, out of their own time. So no, we give a thank you gift to each curator at the end of their curations, but they are not paid during it. They're doing it absolutely for the love of it. Budget wise, it has varied over the years, roughly between £100 to £500 they are given as a budget to spend to add items to the collection.
Thanks, Catherine. Next one for you as well. It's great to hear that you're now getting students coming forward for the projects with no prompting. Did you provide any incentives at the very start of the project, or how did you actually get that rolling?
Yeah, that was really the link with the Students' Union. In the first couple of, definitely the first 3, maybe 4 curations, the Students' Union sort of nominated a student, whether it was from one of our student groups or someone who was on the sort of SABS team or something like that. But what we wanted to do was move away from the Students' Union always nominating somebody, and that's why we went wider and put the call out to the entire university, and that's when we really saw that traction going, and it was getting really embedded within the university.
That's great, and it sounds like it's going to run and run. Fantastic. Question from me, actually. Have you noticed any change in the way that the relationship between staff and students has played out? Has it changed perceptions of either side towards the other side, do you think?
Yes. I think it has. I think it's definitely where I think I said on the slide where I was talking about the reflections, genuinely, we have built some really long lasting friendships and partnerships with the students. I am still, watching some of our ex-students on LinkedIn and all the fantastic things that they've gone on to do. Sarah and Joel, who we co-created the journal article with. Sarah now is at the UN. Joel's doing something fantastic in the creative industry. And, we regularly, chat on LinkedIn and just seeing how things are. So I think it's just, getting to know your students and them getting to know us. I think they love coming back behind the scenes to see what happens in the staff office. We have regular meetings with them. They love coming in and seeing that, and they have seen the work that goes into running a library, the choice of collections. How do you choose things? I think one of our student creators thought they had to read everything that they had chosen, and they were like panicked, like, I've only chosen 2, but those are the ones I've read. I was like, don't think that we've read everything that we've chosen to be part of a collection. So it was really for them, I think it's been enlightening as well.
And do you think that spreads out into the wider student body? Yes,
I think so. As Paul mentioned, that quote that student who was passing by one of the curations at the time, just sort of saying thank you, and it really means a lot to me. Yes, we've noticed not just having the physical display, we have AV materials, videos running and stuff to really get that sort of movement in that area, and people stop and watch. And I think, yeah, it's really embedded. One other thing we've had was we were doing a cultural probe with some of our students doing a UX project, and they kept a diary and they had to go away and say what made them smile on that day. And she came back and wrote the Student Curator Project. So I think, you know, we are seeing it in lots of different areas.
And if I can add to that as well, I think what saying, Kate, is right, that it sort of permeates the whole student body. These things start to go out there because, I mean, Catherine and I meet our students' union every 3 weeks, so we always meet them, so have really good relationships. But I think if you have those established really good relationships, it does get out to the wider community. It feels like the library and the student community just have an excellent relationship, and and that's really helpful for both ways if it works that way. So I definitely get that feeling, from our meetings with them, but also from like the wider student body, that there's this really nice perception of the library amongst the student body, which is obviously very nice and very good for us as well.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Catherine and Paul. I am going to turn to Kate and Alison now for the next few questions. So looking at this great project, what was the budget for it and what were the sources of finance?
That's a great question. So you may or may not be aware that the Science Museum stored a lot of the collection in Blythe House in London, which is a beautiful building that was originally the National Savings Bank. We share it with the V&A and the British Museum, and it went on the market in July because it belongs to the government. Quite sensibly, I think, because it's not ideal collection storage facility, and it's obviously expensive real estate. So we did get money from DCMS in order to build the new building and also to move the objects there. So the figure that I've got is around 40 million for that, which is obviously a lot of money, but it does encompass we've been able to, as part of this move, which is amazing, we've been able to look at every single item that was in Blythe House, risk it, assess it for hazards, make sure it's all barcoded, which is kind of the first time we've been able to do that for 300,000 items, and move it all safely. So that's where that money's come from.
Thank you. Huge undertaking. A physical question now, a practical question. How are you going to make the collection in the building physically accessible?
And that's another great question as well, which I will answer, and Katie can jump in when she wants to. So the idea is that the objects in the main store, when somebody requests that they want to see something, we would move it to the study room for them, so that they can come and look at it in a contained space where we can have some accessibility equipment for them. We'll also talk to people individually about what their needs are, should they have any particular needs that we can support them with. Obviously, some objects are bigger, and we're still working out the exact plans for that. But the idea is that we should be able to use videos, or possibly take people into the main store to view those. But it's still very much a work in progress. The store is in the middle of we've now unpacked 150,000 objects, and we've moved 1,000 pallets from other buildings across the site as well. So it's still kind of work in progress we're working towards.
Amazing. We'll expect an update next year.
Sorry, if I can just add as well, the archive and library are actually held in a separate building on the same site. They've already been there for quite a few years. They were moved out from the Science Museum. So they will be run over to Building 1 for access. At the moment, we run a weekly logistics service into the Science Museum for the reading room there.
Thank you, Katie. Another one for Katie and Alison. What environmental standards were the big store built to, and was there any desire or even possibility to build it with the passive air conditioning modality?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on this. I will stress that in the first place. So we have built it. It's being constructed using recycled steel, sourced from the UK where possible. We've got, the walls are very, very thick to try and keep that insulation in. We control the environment in the main store itself by controlling the humidity rather than the temperature. We have biomass boilers, we have solar panels on the roof. And we also are being very careful we've got a loading bay, which also kind of has, not an airlock, but we can get the lorry completely in the loading bay, shut the outside door and then open the internal door. So we're not letting loads of hot air in the summer and loads of cold air in the winter. So we can try and keep that environment as controlled as possible. I hope that's kind of answered. If you want any more information, contact me and I'll find that out for you.
Thanks, Alison. We're going to go back to Catherine now for the next one. I think you did speak to this a little bit in the presentation, Catherine, but if you could maybe go into a bit more detail about how you actually select the student curators, particularly if there's a bit of competition there.
Yes, good question. So at the very beginning, when the project started, it was the Students' Union nominating people that they wanted to put forward on particular themes. When we went wider and wanted to go out to the whole student body, how did we do it? We created a board with the Students' Union where we chose the themes that we wanted, and we had 3 themes that year: life as I know it, culture and tradition, and third one escapes me. But then after that, we took that theme and we went out. We used the librarians. We went out to course reps to advertise. Do you want to be the next student curator? We wrote a little bit of text to go with it. We did a lot of social media work with, getting out. Do you want to be the next student curator? We mentioned it at academic boards, wherever we could. And then the students were asked to write just a short 150, 200 word submission on their choice of theme and why they wanted to be a student curator. Each time we ran that, we had about a 50% expansion in students coming forward to wanting to do it. We then took the submissions back to the board, which was library team members, faculty librarians, and the Students' Union, and we went through the submissions and just and graded them, really. It was really about the thought process that the student had gone into about the project, what particular ideas they had, how they were going to plan it, that kind of thing. If they had a really good plan and some really sort of effective ideas, then those were the people that were chosen.
Fantastic. And they're librarians in the making, I guess, now.
Yes. One hopes.
Okay, so again, back to Alison and Katie. The video mentioned supporting inexperienced researchers. So how do you plan to do that? Could you expand a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have just had a research engagement manager start in post 2 weeks ago. And this is part of her role. She's quite experienced with supporting university students, for example, and helping them to learn how to research. So it's thinking about what information we have on our website to help people to direct themselves to our collections online, and our library and archive catalogues as well. And then how do we support people who don't know where to start? So she's working that out. This is her task for the next few months, is to actually work that out. We've already got some really great guidance on our library and archive sites from around the group that maybe Katie would want to expand on, around where do you start? You want to find out about this. What have we got that can help you? Katie, do you want to expand on that bit?
Yeah, we have a strategic objective called Open for All, which partly applies to things like diversity amongst the staff, but also amongst the people who visit our museums. And that also applies to our archive and library users too. So we aim to be as friendly and welcoming, and please ask us a silly question, even if you think it's very silly kind of approach. As Alison said in the paper, we want to welcome people who maybe aren't doing academic research but are doing family history, or just coming out of interest for personal reason, for things like that. So that's really our aim, and sort of friendly, outgoing kind of culture to develop. Yeah.
And with that in mind, is there any charge for that service, or is it completely free?
No, it's free.
Brilliant. We'll be sending all of our students along to you ever so shortly. Another question is, how much expansion space is there for new material within the big store?
So if I talk about objects, Katie can talk about library and archive materials. So for objects at the moment, in the main store? None is the answer to that one. So the store was designed and built with the existing collection that we needed to move from Blythe House. So that was the priority. However, we do have a kind of extension to the building on the back that initially we were going to be looking at renting out commercially, but now we will use for our collection. So there's possibility to expand into that. But we also have objects across 10 different aircraft hangars across the site. We're an old RAF site. It is huge. Go and look at it on Google Maps and you can see them all. So we're also now looking at which of those objects can we move out of some of those hangars, which are coming towards the end of their working life, and how can we consolidate things in the remaining hangars that we'll keep for collection items so that we can have space for expansion.
And
for
yeah,
objects.
yeah, we have we have some expansion space for archive and library at this site and at other sites in the north. Not huge amounts, but we do have some, and we're just at the beginning of a strategic project looking at storage across the group for our paper-based collections.
Fabulous. Thank you, Alison and Katie, for those really interesting answers to those fascinating questions. And thank you to the audience for sending the questions in. We've actually come to the end of the questions, I think. Let me just have a quick look. Yep, I think there's just lots of kudos going in the chat about how wonderful all these projects are. So thank you very, very, very much to Catherine, Paul, Alison and Katie, particularly Katie who's moved house today. It's amazing. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Just to note that there is a second Silenced Voices hackathon taking place at 5 p.m. and this will focus on uncovering the data on who is and who is not represented in our collections and research. If you want to join us on this session, the link's available within the Feedloop platform for the conference. And we'll return again tomorrow morning, 9:30, bright and early, with a panel session on shaping inclusive libraries. And I'd just like to reflect on just the wonderful content we've had today and everybody that's participated, whether you've been answering questions, whether you've just been thinking about it, whether you've been a panelist. Thank you for joining us today and engaging with us. And just my reflections are, all of this is extremely inspiring, and it's all about expanding our definitions of leadership, our definitions of openness, our definitions of collections and how we actually go about creating them, and our definitions of who we engage with and how we make our services and collections available and accessible to everybody that wants and needs to use them. So I think this is really inspiring and it really speaks to what we do as a profession. So I'd just like to congratulate everybody that's in our profession, no matter where you are in it. It's just made me reflect on how positive we are as a profession and what we do for our users and for the community in general. So